Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ecosystem Playbook Catalyst. We are really happy and thank you very much for joining us. It's a Catalyst project working to help CSPs and their partners learn more about the ecosystems that they have ambitions to either participate in or kick off or simply study. For the sake of recording this and using it later, we'd really appreciate it if everybody starts off with a mute microphone, and that'll really help us produce a good quality recording. Thank you very much. On the Catalyst a Playbook project for the past 6 months, we've built a framework that'll help development of breaking down an ecosystem into capabilities, understanding the opportunities, and framing these opportunities and capabilities in a way that can be reused by not just the teams that want to collaborate together, but also anybody after the fact who wants to use this information to build their own projects related to ecosystems. Now, STC was the champion of this project. CSG, IBM, Tata, Xera, and Trident participated as valuable contributors, and past 6 months, this has been a very well-gelled, cohesive team. We worked together, we put something out, we're very proud of what we've done. You can find a lot of the content that we've produced on our community. It's on LinkedIn. It's called Ecosystem Design Catalyst. It's a group page that you can join. And of course, on the TM Forum DTW20 resource, the conference resources, you'll find a lot of that content as well. I'm welcoming Lester. Lester, welcome. I see you've joined. Thank you very much for participating as well. We're very excited to give you a walkthrough of the project and give you an introduction to the team. So, having said this, I'm going to just kind of speak to a couple of the goals in a bit of depth about the playbook. So you've got 3 phases, you've got 9 steps. So what? So basically, the idea of the playbook is to help develop a collaborative tool for the complex ecosystems, the partnerships that allow for that complexity to be brought down to a point where capabilities need to be considered for developing technology. These days, technologies their prowess is unbelievable. You can do pretty much everything. If you go to someone in technology, they'll say we can do anything. But we need to understand what you want to do with it. And therefore, this subject is really important when a whole bunch of players, not just one, comes together and they need to get something done. It's really important to understand what, as a business, as an ecosystem, they're trying to achieve. This project actually helps you not just study that, but actually put that down in a granular modular structure so that you can actually work with projects that deal with the kind of new architectures that are out there now to build those technologies. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Lakshmi to start taking us through this case study. In fact, it's not a case study. So we've had case studies where we've studied existing ecosystems and used the playbook to demonstrate how you can actually create data sets that others can learn from it. Here, in this case, we're actually experimenting with a new concept. And in this case, this is a smart emergency services ecosystem being built with a 5G infrastructure. And so we're trying to understand how this business model works. We're trying to understand what key capabilities may be required. And then we'll come back and discuss how you can reuse a lot of the information produced here in a very collaborative way to develop solutions and do things. So over to you, Lakshmi.
Thank you, Atisham. So as Atisham said, I'm from TCS. I'm Lakshmi. I work as an enterprise architect in the industry advisory group of TCS's Communication, Media and Information Services business unit. So Suvashri, my colleague, and I are part of the team from TCS that has worked with Etisham and the rest of the Catalyst team on this ecosystem playbook. And we're happy for this opportunity to do a demo of, how we use the playbook to one of the use cases, which is the 5G smart EMS ecosystem. So I will set the stage about the opportunity or the ecosystem, what was the business context and what we chose. And Sushri and I will take you through, how we use the ecosystem playbook to bring it to life, from looking at the visualizing the ecosystem to like what Hisham was telling right away, going all the way to the capability mapping. So let's start with the emergency medical services ecosystem. So as we know, like, for TCS, the ecosystems is a big focus area, and we understand that a lot of business model opportunities happen around here. And we also know that 5G and the complementary technologies associated with 5G is a major driver for, ecosystem evolution, like leading to the blurring of industry boundaries, as we know, like, where there are multi-industry ecosystem models, business models between, let's say, CSPs and other industries like smart manufacturing, smart home, remote healthcare, and a lot of opportunities. So in that context, we wanted to evaluate how can we use 5G in the emergency medical services. Basically, by emergency medical services, we know it's a 911 and, calling for the ambulance and you reaching the hospital and, the whole process, right? So we were looking at, what can we do in this particular business area to leverage 5G, and can we enhance or even revolutionize, the ecosystem in a way that, we can save more lives. And that's what this opportunity or this ecosystem idea is about. At the Sham, I haven't finished that, sorry.
Okay.
So coming back, so if you see the previous slide that we saw, so there is this pre-incident or your non-critical emergency period where, so if we look at how 5G can enable that entire EMS journey, right? So we know there is the time before an incident happens. So we can have remote surveillance, or we can have the remote medical monitoring and diagnosis of vulnerable patients, or, you can even have at home, the medical professionals coming and checking on somebody who has a non-critical emergency. So these all things can be enabled with 5G and other related technologies. And similarly, when an ER call comes in, the emergency response management, the crisis collaboration and communication, your intelligent traffic management for ambulances, there's a lot of things you can do. And then you have the in-ambulance, you are in transit in the ambulance. And this is the area where we are focusing on, which is around, you have the patient, you have the paramedics, you have the, the hospital staff waiting at the hospital. So how can we use the power of 5G, remote collaboration, and various other diagnostic and collaboration technologies to enable that we, save lives and we provide the best in-transit care and save time. And then also post-recovery also, there are various opportunities that we can bring home to the customer or the patient in this case. So our focus is on that in-ambulance care part predominantly, and that's what we are calling this connected ambulance platform. So now we'll look at like how this connected ambulance platform comes to life, right? So as I said, there is the CSP is the orchestrator of this opportunity, and we have the CSP delivering the 5G connected ambulances. The idea being that you can leverage the power of 5G, the high bandwidth, the extreme reliability, and the low latency of 5G to let's take the scenario of, you have the patient and he's undergoing a lot of blood loss and there is a lot of trauma happening. So through the VR lenses that the paramedics is wearing, the doctors back in the hospital, doctor and the ER staff are able to have a real-time immersive view of what is happening, because you have video collaboration software, which is solutions integrated into it. You have this VR-based immersive streaming integrated into it, and you have 5G streaming this high-quality video images back to the the practitioners in the hospital ER, and they are able to intervene and tell the paramedic, what to do. Maybe you can have remote diagnostics or some kind of test using haptics or some other monitors you have connected. And the other major advantage is that, like normally you have an ambulance coming in, and at that point is when, the ER staff takes over. Till then they're not sure what is the status of the patient. So here you're getting a real-time view of what is happening with the patient, so that you can be anticipate and be ready the moment he lands in. You're ready to get into action. So that is what this whole solution brings together. The ambulance is connected through 5G. And now if we come back to our concept of, what is the ecosystem for this? So we know that this is a bit of a complex ecosystem with multiple participants. Like we have the CSPs who provide the network infrastructure. And as we said, in our case, we are assuming that we are considering the CSPs to orchestrate. And the first set of, if you look at the immediate ecosystem, this involves the patients, the first responders or the paramedics, the doctors, the ambulance staff, and all that. Then you have the EMS agencies. In our case, we are actually considering the US market. We know that this is a use case being explored in different markets by different telco providers, as well as health agencies, right? So we have all those kind of healthcare providers and healthcare ecosystem participants. Then you have your technology and solution providers like the VR lens, the remote video collaboration, the diagnostic equipment providers, and all that. So that is like the immediate ecosystem. And here we also know that there's an extended ecosystem, right? Where we are talking about like insurance companies, the regulators, the various technology integrators, the fire service, police. So basically the extended ecosystem around it. Yeah, we're good at it, Shan. You're on track.
Sure.
So now coming to how do we bring this to market, kind of. So we know that, there are various services and solutions that we can integrate and bring to market as part of a platform like this. So basically we are talking about this 5G EMS platform being created by the created and orchestrated by the CSP, where you bring together these medical and other technology service providers. You bring together the healthcare ecosystem participants, you bring together all the other actors together. So in our case, what we have primarily chosen as our model to monetize this is like, sell it to the EMS agencies in the US market. And there are around 18,000 to 23,000 of them. Some are private and some run by the government. So we are thinking of that, of the EMS agencies, our primary strategic buyer to this service. And obviously we have to bring the rest of the ecosystem players into the platform. And there are various other models also through which this can further be scaled or extended, like you can sell premium services to customers. Like we also saw that, the pre-incident and the post-incident cases where you can actually provide doorstep services or telemedicine or remote diagnostics and all. So you can actually have it as a B2B, B2C service, or you can extend it through the insurance providers where people subscribe to a certain set of high quality services that because they know that, this is offering me a next level of, life-saving opportunities. And also like it can be B2B2C where you have your private agencies selling it to customers and you are hiring them. So that is basically what this opportunity is about. I think we'll take a pause there and see if we have any questions on that before we go into the playbook. I think the silence means that there's probably permission for us to move on. So I will take you through as Etishan said, there is around 9-10 steps in the ecosystem playbook to, kind of take an opportunity, evaluate it, see the potential, and, kind of take it towards, the value streams and coming back to how the capabilities. So I'll take you through the first couple of steps and then Subhashri will take over. So first stage is actually visualizing the ecosystem. So here, like as we already saw, the ecosystem, we have the CSP, who's obviously the orchestrator, and we have the enabler. So basically the idea is that the playbook tells you to choose the stakeholders, choose the roles that they have, and which involves like enablers, actors, and all that. So here we know it's predominantly the CSP, the healthcare participants, and then your technology service and all those participants. So that is basically what the stakeholders is, and we can model each of them in detail here. And then the ecosystem diagram also, like, so basically what we are saying is CSP is enabling this 5G EMS platform, and where they are bringing together all these participants of the technology, and all those services are integrated into the platform, where the various participants can use, as well as, you know, to provide their services through it. So whether it's the healthcare participants like doctors, patients, the EMS agency. So the top players being the CSP, who's your orchestrator, and EMS agency being your primary buyer or your primary customer. And then you have the platform synchronizing and orchestrating the rest of the players. So that is in a short snapshot of how our ecosystem looks like. So
So,
what is the next?
so
Yeah, go
just to draw the attention to the steps or the phase, the idea behind Visualize obviously is to start at a very high level of engagement of how everybody actually comes together. What's in it for everybody? They start asking those questions, and you kind of set the stage for a collaboration, for a collaborative footprint, right? You're trying to see, what do you do? How do you do it? What do you achieve? And, hence what kind of constraints or different types of things you might have. Go ahead, Lakshmi, keep going.
Yeah, thanks, Atishan, for that. So then the next step is looking at constraints associated with that ecosystem. So here in our case, we know that, we are talking about a medical services ecosystem. So it's going to be heavily regulated. There would be data privacy laws in terms of the data regarding the customers. There are limitations in terms of the paramedic skills. There are limitations in terms of what the paramedic is allowed to do. He can't obviously do all the interventions, even if the doctors know that, this is what is required at this point. Then similarly with the equipment availability, and in our case, like the CSP has to ensure, like we are talking about extreme quality of like availability and reliability of what is being communicated. You can't have the connections go off halfway or send half the information, right? So these are some of these constraints, and as you can see, this model helps us think as to between these relations, like where are things that which could actually be constraints for us. And we also look at the characteristics of the ecosystem. So as you can see in this case, we know that it's not a very open one, because it's quite regulated market, and also the CSP is orchestrating it. So it's a relatively towards a closed side. And similarly, there is a mix of participants. If you're looking from, if it's a cluster or a diverse ecosystem, there is a mix of participants. So it's somewhere relatively towards a diverse. And in terms of competitiveness also, there aren't a lot of players, but still, if you see in terms of the service providers like VR, or you're talking about diagnostics or collaboration and communication, there are a lot of competitive service providers out there from whom we can select. And similarly, like, this is a very relatively highly moderated by the CSP, and between the CSP and the EMS agency, like, it's not a very loose ecosystem. It's relatively on the moderated side.
So if you were to, so the idea here is, if we were to do let's say a B2B2X play, and we're trying to go into a platform that serves a whole, like as we saw in the discussion, so many different stakeholders around that platform, it has to then be, based on the nature of this, not a very open system in which just about everybody can participate. You're talking about a very closed ecosystem in which a lot of things are moderated, not just because of control, but also because it's a very heavily regulated market, and therefore it's going to be driven by a lot of service levels, and hence very controlled set of who can participate and how competitive it's going to be. Right, so that kind of comes into consideration when you start to look at, okay, can it grow? Can it scale? Can it achieve some of the ambitions that it sets out to achieve? And later on, you'll see how we get into this.
Yeah, so Shri will start with the opportunity board and take us through the rest of the playbook. Shri, over to you.
Thanks, Lakshmi.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Shubhasree. I'm an enterprise architect from Tata Consultancy Services, colleague of Lakshmi's in the enterprise architecture team of CMI, Communications, Media and Information Services. So yeah, so we had like a lot of fun, working on this Catalyst program, and really glad to bring this to you now at this stage. So yeah, so Lakshmi identified like what the ecosystem players are, and then she also explained how the constraints, we are mapping the constraints and we are mapping different parts of the ecosystem. So based on that, what we next do in the playbook is, outline the best opportunity that, feels most viable, right? So out of multiple opportunities that could arise of an ecosystem, we choose the one that we, most like and we feel has most potential, and then we move ahead with it. For this particular case, it's a smart EMS platform for fatality reduction, right? So the next step is the most important step, as we know that identifying opportunities is easy, but to hash out that opportunity, to groom that opportunity and find out whether that opportunity really has value proposition and it can be monetized or not. We the playbook offers a very comprehensive methodology for that. We have defined our own opportunity canvas specifically for ecosystem. Of course, it's based on the Osterwalder business model canvas, but it's specific for ecosystems. So we have 4 different areas of in the canvas. The first area is about value proposition. The second on how the ecosystem will acquire customers. The third is how the ecosystem will make money, monetize the solution. And the fourth is how the ecosystem will retain its players as well as customers, right? So let us look at each of them in detail, right? In the value proposition section, what we do is we take the participants of the ecosystem. So we already know what the past participants are like, right? We have the CSP, we have the EMS services providers, we have other players like national or state health agencies, we have technology providers and other partners. So what we do is we map the value proposition for each of the player in the ecosystem and try to see whether the value proposition is compelling enough, okay, why they should be in the ecosystem, right? And if in case we feel that we do not have a compelling enough proposition for a few of them, we deal with it, and I'll tell you how we deal with it in a bit, right? The second part, what we do is we figure out how this ecosystem acquires customers. So for that, we use something known as acquisition loops. These loops are what we have created, are like a set of pre-modeled loops which have their own value stages against them. For example, a social viral loop, right? How would a social viral loop acquire customers? Like a new user signs up, things at school, and then actively refers it to friends. That's how a social viral loop, like say Instagram, acquires its customers. So in that way, we have thought of all the different kinds of acquisition loops there could be, and we have provided like a list from which we can easily choose and even sort of customize if it's that loop, right, for the ecosystem. So for our ecosystem, how will the ecosystem acquire customers? We will we are going by a B2B marketing. So it's like a paid sales loop that we've chosen, wherein the new users are onboarded on the platform. The platform generates revenue. The users are paying, and the revenue gets generated. That revenue gets distributed to fund sales and lobbyist teams. For example, in EMS, you also might need to lobby some of the government and some of the other parties, right, to get this onboarded. So those sales teams get funded, and those sales reps go ahead and do the sales. So that's a simple paid sales loop that we have chosen for our ecosystem. Then for monetization, similarly, we have a laundry list of monetization loops that are typically used or in a business model. Of course, we could add new monetization models, but this is mostly a comprehensive list. And again, we have chosen like a pay-as-you-go kind of a monetization loop, wherein they are signing up, and they are also paying upfront, as well as they are paying monthly fees, right, based on usage and number of ambulances that are say using the platform, and probably the slices that are getting used. So from that, what we do, we have, since this is the use case, what we are doing is, we are trying to figure out whether the ecosystem is monetarily viable or not. So we have like a addressable market size of ambulance services market size that was 27 billion in 2019, and it's projected to grow at the 9.3% CAGR to around 50 billion, okay, in 2027. So we have a very based on 5G and then the recent pandemic, we have a very healthy trend of ambulance services market, and that's typically a portion of the market that we want to exploit. Okay. Then with regard to some of the ARPU figures as well, we expect some growth on around 20 to 25 to 30% of ARPU on the CSP shares for B2B customers, and so that's how we have projected the basically the monetary figures. Who's affected? So then the playbook also provides a way for us to see what are the units in our organization that is impacted by people, process, technology impacts, and we can map it out for an initial understanding of how much it's going to what kind of effort it's going to take to go and build this ecosystem, so that we have our business case developed further. Right. So this is how we check out the monetization part, and then the most important part is again the retention loop. So remember, I spoke about value proposition and about the fact that some of the players may not have exciting enough incentives to stay on. So what we did next is the playbook allows us to do is basically map the value propositions of the different players in this kind of like of a graph, right, wherein you sort of map the impact and the time to value. So the ones on the top, are fairly good because those have like a good financial viability, but the ones at the bottom right, insurance and other places, they may have slower time to market, and even the value proposition might be a little lesser. So what we try to do is, you see some stickies here, right? These stickies are basically identifying what the concerns are, okay, in terms of say for example for ambulance service agencies, you have investment and liability concerns. For example, people might sue the agencies saying that, okay, they have registered for this kind of a fancy service, but the lives could not be saved. And they say that, if for the CSP, for example, high expectations. So they have to provide an ultra reliable, low latency 5G service, like at all areas which they have committed to at all times, right? Suddenly, if the network goes off and something happens, that's a huge risk. So we have to now figure out when we are designing the capabilities, right, and the enablers, how to how to address these concerns in the value proposition, so that our solution will have that that into it. Having said that, we have again, selected a retention loop wherein we are saying that basically it's a content creation loop wherein an EMS agency who's onboarded on the platform has created content or has benefited from it and wants to benefit more. And to benefit more, they would invite other participants to that ecosystem, say for example hospitals and insurance providers, to improve the financial viability as well, and sort of to improve the value proposition overall, right? So that's the retention loop that we have selected.
So the idea, just to sum up for you, Swashree, the idea of an opportunity canvas or the modeling part of the playbook. So we had Lakshmi explained the opportunity part of the playbook. The modeling part is about looking at growth, right? So ecosystems, the feature ecosystems are all about growth. So acquisition and monetization, retention are the growth strategies that these loops represent. And the idea is that in the world of business architecture, for example, you use value streams. So what they're really doing is pointing to the kind of value streams that you need to look at. And also to provide a framework for collaboration, right? So all the partners that you see, these colored stickies, they're different partners, right? You have the greens, you have the CSPs in purples, and then you've got the reds. different people coming in and weighing in on those opportunities and using them to define their opportunity in a way that you can model it to then go further and see how you can collaborate. So stay modular, stay componentized, but go in and leave a trail of choices, a trail of analysis that helps you get there as partners. Okay, so we'll now jump quickly to the next so that we can leave enough room to discuss, so we don't use up all our time for presenting. We'll try to wrap this up quickly.
Absolutely, I'll be brief, Adisham. Okay, so going to the next part, what we have next is basically 7, 8, and 9, and that's basically stage 3 of the playbook, where we are actually doing the modeling of the capabilities and the feature stories that we can go and bring to development, right? So how do we do that? What we are doing is, we have each stage, right? Each kind of growth loop, the acquisition, monetization, and the retention growth loop. So we are identifying the different value stages. First of all, see, new user signs up, right? So what are the different stages of a new user sign up journey, right? So you have like things like demos, you have evaluation, you have pilot execution, and then you have the platform delivery. This is at the onboarding stage, right? And then for each step, we basically map the capabilities needed to the tasks that the CSPs or the AR/VR providers or the technology providers and even the EMS agencies, which is the customer in this case, need to do to enable that capability and to make it work, right? Then what we do next, Adisha, maybe we can go for a more exciting example in the user service. Actually, that might be more interesting.
Okay. So what you're doing is you're taking each of the loop, you're taking each of the stage in the loop, and then you are turning that into a mapping tool. In this mapping tool, you took the stages, you created you got everyone to participate and discuss their goals and what it needed to achieve certain capabilities. And then on a bottom-up level, you start to define these feature stories so that you can start creating these modular capabilities that address each of the different dimensions of the capabilities, and you can then keep them, and architects and engineers and business people can together understand what context these feature stories are or user stories are actually being developed in. So you want to have a look at here, I think.
Yeah, I'll start using, yeah. So what we've done is, in a simple way, we have mapped the kind of stages, okay, what this ecosystem would happen, the service. So
kind of like a value stream.
Yeah, kind of like a value stream. So it's like the EMS agency will receive the emergency call, right? Then assign the first responder, and then inside the ambulance, they would perform some emergency procedures, and then the final step of the service is transferring the patient to the hospital, right? So what are the different capabilities here that the CSPs as well as the technology providers and need to ensure? So they are like service availability, service management, service orchestration. And then based on those, what we've done is like we've created the feature story saying that, as a CSP, I need to enable that the cost that I've committed to for this 5G services is maintained. Okay. How is that then mapped onto the enablers? It's mapped onto enablers such as, slice management and network slice manager or intelligence edge platform for the applications to respond immediately and take decisions on, right? And then you would have a sensor data aggregator that would go and aggregate the data in real time and provide values and analytics or useful interventions for you, right?
So these are actually platforms, right? So these are enablers that support these capability dimensions, which are features or user stories, which then support the various tasks that all the participants perform, and all the way up to the capabilities that actually kind of encapsulate them, kind of capture them within, the pointing to those growth loops. So for example, if you've decided this is how your ecosystem is going to grow, it needs to then drill down all the way down to which enablers need to achieve which capabilities, sort of at a high enough level, and then leave this trace for everyone involved to always come back, change their story, add to it. If they want to go to more detail, go to more detail, or if they want to stay at a high level, stay at a high level, right?
Another good thing that we have done is, we've made use of the TMF business architecture capabilities to identify these capabilities, so that, there is a one-to-one mapping, at least as much as possible. Not all the 5G capabilities can be mapped straight away, but, most of the capabilities we've picked up from the TMF list. And that provides like a very modular way on which, those assets or enablers that we are saying are impacted. So we can pick that up and straight away start drawing, the target architectures, right? And that itself also is still modular based on the feature stories and the individual capabilities that we have identified. So it's very easy, or we've like provided a mechanism to do kind of a plug and play kind of pluggable components or modularized components of the ecosystem and how to develop them, right? Hisham, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just want to, I think we're overrun. We need to quickly, let me demonstrate, Swashri, what you're saying. Thank you very much. This is very, very informative, but I just want to quickly take everyone to how we use to then, once we've created this data, how we use CreateFX, for example, in the project to then build this data layer for the project, so that the purpose is, look, we want other people to be able to use this. We want other engineers, the architects, and also if you want to go back to the mural, like you just saw, and you want to establish what assumptions were made, what kind of business decisions were made, and link it all the way up to your business model, you would be able to do that. So in the, for example, CreateFX, the same project that you were just looking at would be a very complex set of, like tons of stakeholders, lots of relationships that exist between these stakeholders. And we kind of want to, take those, but not make them really linear. We want to be able to build a platform where we can show how these repositories, so as you can see, the level of complexity that gets drawn, that drives something like this is humongous. So I think this, before I take too long to do this, I'm going to wrap up in the next few minutes. So I just want to walk you through the assumptions that were just made. So for example, there were the loops, then you had your capabilities, all of your capabilities, as you mentioned, from the TM Forum models. Within each of these capabilities, you have all of those feature stories. Remember when we were looking at the feature stories? These feature stories were the black stickies. You're capturing them here. You're talking about how they are going to be linked up, and you can then start refining them. You can start building them into your release trains. And the way you do that is to take these feature stories into a Kanban, which we call a capability portfolio. Now here, the thing is that there is the modularity, the ability to have these features be available to everyone, business and technology people, to explore, to hook back into the business model, and to then further take into your release trains, depending on however you are trying to do the work with it, and to assign various types of stakeholders to it. Is essentially how CreateFX can really help you build that model. And of course, not just a particular group of people from a particular project, but a lot more people from around the industry can start using the service. It's a very useful way of actually consolidating the service. So
yeah, basically, then we can start development almost. I mean, that's where you can pick up, the portfolio teams can sort of pick up and start prioritizing these stories and assigning the stakeholders, and move on to elaborating these features into development stories.
Yeah, so the idea is the modularity is important. Remember, we're going into this into a world of these new types of services, a lot of decoupled architectures, modular componentized architectures. You want to be able to trace back to business capabilities in a similar way. You want to go upstream to that logic. Technology can build anything, right? Business needs to kind of partners need to, in a very structured way, kind of know how to steer that ship and experiment with it. So that's the idea, to have that collaboration and a model that allows you to just steer through, ask the right questions and collaborate together, do things in a few days that you will probably need back and forth, probably months, to just kind of know what everybody's trying to do. So good. Thank you very much, Swashri. I think that was a very interesting presentation. Would you like to take some questions now?
Absolutely. We will be happy to answer me and Lakshmi as much as we can. So yeah, open for questions, please.
Hi, this is Lester here. I just had a question. I just want to confirm exactly the scope of this catalyst. So this catalyst is this playbook, which is a template in Trident or in CreativeX that guides me through like a whole set of processes to build these models for developing an ecosystem. So that's the playbook, and then you've almost like demonstrating it with this healthcare scenario. Is that right?
That's true. That's true. Absolutely. So
that's right. But apart from Curate, we also have like a an ebook and a step-by-step instruction guide. It's just not a Curate template, which is it's obviously together. It can be it should be used together with the playbook.
So the idea, Lester, is that there is the playbook itself is trying to address the idea of tearing down ecosystems into capabilities and collaboration points for people to come together and actually be able to see what is expected of each other and the combined set of capabilities that should be developed. So yes, it's a kind of a guide or a framework in how to achieve that in a collaborative way. Most of the focus is on the business side of things. In other words, trying to understand how the various aspects, the makeup of that ecosystem turn into these capabilities that may be addressed by technology.
And I've used this Osterwalder business value canvas before. How does this differ from taking that Osterwalder approach?
In many ways. So for example, the Osterwalder approach is a very good approach, for example, to when you're starting out a business and you're looking, it's a very inside out view about this is my business, these are my stakeholder partners, and this is my strengths and my weaknesses. Over time, the ecosystems have evolved differently, right? So from an architectural perspective, you're talking about many to many and combined ecosystem capabilities. You want to look at how they grow, right? So together we grow, and what do we contribute in that growth as individual pieces, cogs in the system or partners. And so this kind of tweaks that way of thinking into developing those sets of capabilities in a very distinct way. So for example, you want to know how a particular monetization event will happen. So in doing so, what will be the contribution of various partners? How will they share it? How do we develop experiences together and things like that? So connecting that to an outcome, going from an opportunity and then to the outcome. So it just kind of expands a little bit more than just what an Osterwalder would do. It starts by assessing opportunity. It ends up delivering capabilities. So that was the idea. And another thing, what I would add to the first question you had. So one other thing, it does two very interesting ways to use it. So for example, after we started the project, we started seeing a lot of these ecosystems out there. Like we define them not as partnerships, not even strategic partnerships. We think that ecosystems are more than that. Ecosystems are essentially when one dominant player, orchestrator, is able to provide some kind of a platform that actually helps others to do business, to create this new value. And it's not just, if I buy you, vertically integrate, or I just kind of do this partnership and then try to do things. I'm just trying to do the old with the, trying to do the same. Here, we start with the premise we can't do everything. And we start with the premise that the customer expectation is going to change more rapidly than any one partner can actually meet. And therefore, when people come to their strengths, you have to create this, if you will, an ecosystem, a relationship that you're able to look at and address that broader customer need. And therefore, you also need tools. You also need a way of working together to achieve that. It's not going to be your linear kind of path to assessing requirements, kind of a waterfall, if you will. It's the same thing as, you know, the new architecture, you know, your subject area, you know, ODA, what the, you know, the whole point of decoupling, the whole point of componentizing, you know, and then just kind of creating these overlays, the views of how technology works. It's the same thing with business also, that you have to break it down and decouple those things, and then also find how people can impact the overlaps. So we produced a guide, we produced a how-to, we produced a template, and we produced models that can be used stepwise. And then we did some case studies. For example, you can use an existing ecosystem, break it down, so others can look at that using the playbook, and then start making modifications on that template, save a lot of time. Similarly, you can do something like we did here today, which is to sort of assume and build something and then bring partners on board and say, is this what we're looking at? So it's a good, it's more of a collaborative kind of a framework for that. I hope I was able to answer that question.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody?
Yeah, Kevin here. I guess one of the things also just maybe to point out is the kind of the level of TM form assets that you considered as part when we were looking at the playbook. You know, we talked about business capabilities. We're also looking at things like the partnering guide. You also look at APIs and other elements within the form. So really, it's a case of trying to pull as many of these as these assets and artifacts that are available within the form and making them relevant within the ecosystem playbook perspective. I don't know if anybody wanted to kind of talk a little bit more.
No, I definitely second that. I think, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's exactly what it is. If you think about it, kind of an aggregation platform for the TM Forum standards, to be honest with you. So for example, when you're looking at capabilities, you go into these aspects of process. You go into these aspects of functional mapping. You go into these aspects of, you know, architecture, and you start talking about which APIs or which use case. So here, essentially in our mapping tools, we kind of then use them as enablers, and so you can it potentially opens up all of the or most of the TM Forum assets for mapping. That's a very good point.
But I think the other thing we found is it also helps kind of pull them together a bit as well. So rather than looking at business capabilities in isolation or APIs in isolation or ETOM or even, you know, the partnering model and other elements, and one of the things we talked a lot about as well and thinking about was the whole being able as a potentially as the next phase is looking at how things about the open digital framework, how that can be incorporated as well, you know, going forward into this.
Yes, with regards to the open digital framework, I mean, I think that we're going to move into that, you know, not just the assets, but the overall concept of, you know, the architectural concepts, component architecture, and component-based architecture is going to actually leverage. It's going to heavily leverage on business requirements to be very modular. To be very specifically, you want to be able to go all the way down to you will need architectural concepts like encapsulation. You will need to look at things from an objective point of view, hook up the various aspects of the business, the ecosystems, you know, pieces to hook up to this modular scalable architecture. So you need that kind of convergence in your design effort. No longer can you just do linear waterfall requirements to map to a very sophisticated componentized cloud-based architecture, you know. So yes, it fits right, you know, hand in glove with that. Yes.
And I also think, you know, when, you know, we've had discussions with some of the other Catalyst projects, especially those in terms of those ecosystem type Catalyst projects, and, you know, we can see a real synergy between what they're trying to do and what we've done and how potentially the asset of the playbook, whether it's in CurateFX or whether it's in the electronic format or the Word format, could be very beneficial to, you know, future Catalyst projects as well. And I think this was something on a previous call that I think it was Dave Millam was raising, is the fact that he could see, you know, how what we've done could be combined with others and, you know, really help accelerate some of the planning around future Catalyst projects for that were ecosystem related.
Yeah, he you know, business model automation, really, really important, I think. You know, cutting into a collaborative model and going all the way down to capabilities, and then turning those capabilities into these usable feature stories or executable user stories that you can then just kind of move around, you know, get rid of, create new, or just build with. And that's the idea. You know, you want to go all the way down, but then work your way back up, and do it when everyone's on the board. So I think anything that brings people together, right, in the design process, anything that brings them together in the design process on the business side, very, very essential. And just the frameworks. I mean, we had fun using them. You can start, if you start doing ETOM mapping, if you start looking at like the API, you know, for not just from an architectural perspective, but how do we map some of these? You start seeing how these capabilities can start defining some of those architectural elements, the planning around them, right? So if you're looking at an ecosystem of a connected car and you want to know if you can offer that as a platform in a region instead of just one country, you start looking at the API mesh in a completely different way. Now, you could, somebody asked the question, hey, what can you do? And the answer is, I can do just about anything. What do you need, right? Age-old question, really. But that age-old question needs to be in an ecosystem. 5 people need to weigh in on it. It's just not one person's prerogative. So they have to sit down and say, hey, this is the experience. These are the limitations. This is how we think this is going to play out. It's not just a use case. It's an entire business model that we have. And so that's, you know, how, that's why probably
yeah, I think the other thing that's very important is the fact that the process of working through the playbook is equally as important as the outcome it creates, because through that collaboration, you're identifying things. So it's not just about the end product, it's how you got there. And in actual fact, in some ways, the journey is actually more important and critical to the overall success than the final outcome.
That's well put. No, absolutely. So it was a great pleasure to actually have the opportunity to work with a team like this. I think everybody was really excited. We got to have fun, so that was great.
Likewise, we had like a lot of, yeah, we had a lot of fun. It was a very nice collaboration between all the teams that we had. So yeah, so I guess 3 minutes in, and if there are any more questions, we are happy to take that on overall playbook or specifically on this ecosystem.
All right. Thank you, Lakshmi and Shastri. Thanks, Lester, for those insightful questions. Thank you very much for listening in. It takes patience. Kevin, thanks for the discussion. And Michael, Karthik, everybody else on the team, lots of people from TCS. Thank you so much for being here today, supporting us, as always. And we had a great fun sharing this case study and the idea. We look forward to doing more of that. Really do. I think we need to do more of this. So we'll see you soon.
Thanks very much. Stay safe,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
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 So just let me. Bye, guys.